Hello, everyone. Welcome to probably the technical second episode, but technically also the first episode of Morbidly Elenctic. The reason why is just generally with the trademark of wordy gurdy, so I didn't want to get into any legal issues or anything with that. Technically, I would kind of be safe, but didn't want to take the chances. So this is the Morbidly Elenctic show. And so generally, the Morbidly Elenctic show is a podcast where we cover topics from hot button issues to fandoms and other knickknacks of interest, with the focus of being Socratic or a Socratic unraveling of the subject matter for purpose of kind of reaching a deeper communal understanding, generally in regards to the topic. And speaking of said topic, what we will be covering today is the general changes in comics and the artists and concepts which change them, particularly how characters kind of evolve. So we did previously record for a little bit where we kind of had that first part. That was technical issues on my end where I kind of screwed up and hit the wrong button. So I kind of
we might be able to edit that back in.
Maybe, but I would say definitely this is a better way.
We're just gonna restart anyway.
It's better just to go clean slate right from the beginning.
Yeah.
This time, I swear I will hit pause and not stop to delete everything or to stop the whole thing. But fingers crossed, or I'm figuratively crossing my fingers, but literally, it
You
can't
can
be
see
seen.
me right now. I'm crossing my fingers.
But we already did kind of talk a little bit about it, so I think what we'll do now is first, of course, I'm not just alone, as obvious from the other voices. It's not just me. I'm not a very good what was it, mimer? Fucking
Not
using a pupper.
good at pantomiming.
Yeah, I'm not good at with like the fucking ventriloquist. I'm not a very good ventriloquist, so these are people around me. I'm not crazy and alone. But these are,
I promise.
if do you guys wish to introduce yourself?
I'm Zander, with a Z.
I like the name Sid, so I'm just gonna go by that.
Her name is Sid.
With an S, if that wasn't
Sid with an S, short for Shaina.
obvious.
We'll
But-
edit that out later.
But anyways, I guess we could just kind of
Yeah,
continue forward.
just to kind of sum up what we were talking about before. We were discussing the changes in comic book character-driven times and character arcs, character development, and how the comics have changed with the times that reflect the times they're created in.
And
I
was specifically going on to like the Marvel idea and how objectively, so not really, it's not a fact to place, but rather it's more my subjective opinion that might be slightly objective, that some of the Marvel characters are more copy paste, not generally really well, like kind of sustained in terms of like their creation. They're not really well thought through. It's very practical, more of making rather than the
see,
character.
It's not so much that they're not thought through. I think what you're trying to say is that Marvel
safe.
found exactly they're safe. Marvel found a
Economic
narrative
or-
that works, and they've stuck with it for 80 plus years. DC, since the beginning, DC has been taking risks. They've been coming up with characters that they have to justify to their readers as to why they're important, and they do. They don't do it because they have to. They do it because they want to, and those characters they create have that type of breadth. As opposed to Marvel, which you have basically, in my opinion, what happened was Marvel started with something as eclectic as the Fantastic Four. It really started with the Fantastic Four,
And
1961.
As a small side note, the characters I consider really well grounded and really well like built up is like Spider-Man, of course, Fantastic Four, the X-Men, a lot of characters in the X-Men. Maybe also Skull guy, the biker guy.
Ghost Rider?
Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider also looks like a very interesting.
Now, I think it's important to mention really quick that because we're going to be talking about this. We're talking about Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four being Gold Generation, Reed Richards, Ben Grimm, Sue Storm, and Johnny Storm. That's the Fantastic Four that we're talking about, because there have been a few renditions in going.
Right.
He says very arrogantly.
I wanted to say that off of what you said when you said Spider-Man doesn't fall into that like safe, whatever you were trying to say, where Marvel does kind of like
A mold.
cookie cutter
Cookie-cutter mold,
Yeah.
yes.
yeah,
That's
like
exact-
like
Spider-
back origin stories. And I think that for its time, Spider-Man, like you said, was very original, and it was like an edgy, nerdy, like a nerdy superhero is new and edgy. But I think, and this goes into the evolution of how what Marvel does really well, and I think, I mean, DC does really well, and I think Marvel falls flat, is I think, like, if you take today, like, it's not edgy, it's just kind of normal that Peter Parker would be nerdy. Like, it's
Right.
not something that's like he would be bullied for being nerdy.
Right.
Like, he wouldn't. Like, you don't,
Yeah.
like, you get bullied for other reasons now.
Right.
And I think, like, there's needs to be something, like, and I don't know if I agree with this, but I did read somewhere that someone had a headcanon or, like, of, like, Spider-Man should be trans. Because it's something that, and I don't know if I agree with this, but something edgy enough.
I'm glad that you said that.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you opened that up. Let's unpack that a little bit. I
Yeah.
think that's a really interesting topic. So that directly translates into comic books reflecting what happens in modern times. So in my opinion, we're talking about two different things here.
Yes.
Peter Parker, who is a
Yeah.
person that is a Spider-Man.
And he's the most relatable Marvel hero, even
Right.
hero in general, I would say.
So
'cause
if
his whole backstory and
if we're talking about making Peter Parker a transsexual character,
Mhm.
you're talking about a completely different game
For sure.
than making Spider-Man
For
a
sure.
transsexual.
And
Spider-Man being the moniker, which is why Miles Morales was created
Right.
as the first openly gay Spider-Man character.
He is?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah,
I
in
didn't
his
know that.
canon, Miles Morales is canonically, which is why he is
Ah!
so famous. He is canonically the first openly homosexual Spider-Man. Not first openly homosexual Marvel character,
Right,
that's
right,
Falcon,
right,
who had a marriage in the comic books. But Miles
Oh.
Morales is canonically gay. He is canonically homosexual.
Okay, so I agree with that. I don't think they should like make Peter Parker something that is not like they wouldn't make him black. They would just make a black Spider-Man. They wouldn't
Right.
make a trans.
Make a new Spider-Man.
Right.
Exactly.
And I agree with that. I kind of like just meant like something that would admit like change. Like why would he be bullied today
that
Okay.
could
versus
also
being a
be-
nerd?
That could also be in terms of like with matching the storyline. It could kind of go because the whole backstory of Spider-Man is he is always the downtrodden. He is always the everyman
Or
superhero.
outcast or whatever.
Yeah, he's
you
That's
know?
what it
an
would be.
everyman
That's the
superhero.
answer in the question.
He's-
Spider-Man is known for his superpower. If you really talk to someone, his superpower
He always
is not
gets
giving
the
up.
end of the stick.
He never, not even just
Or
that.
well-
His superpower is that because he's used to always being the last in line, he never ever gives up. He doesn't know how
That's
to
the thing,
die.
though, is the main thing as well from that is because
And that's not cool in today's society.
Right.
But like the main thing with that is his origin has to be basically it's with great
Loner.
power comes from great responsibility, and basically it's always guilt.
Yeah.
Guilt that he couldn't save his
Mhm,
uncle.
mhm,
Great
mhm,
power
mhm.
comes great responsibility. He always screws up. He always has to find his own way to go through. And I think with in terms of the going with the transgender, there's a lot of situations that can kind of go with that where it's like creating a new like kind of environment there with that character. That would be an interesting
What
kind of
if-
concept to build with.
Instead of just like nerdy Peter Parker and that's why he's an outcast, what if he's just straight up like a lone wolf, like badass? Like that could totally change like the
Yeah,
way
that
Spider-Man
would change
is.
the perspective
And that's
completely.
my point, I think, of like how Marvel just kind of sticks with like how it's been.
Right.
Whereas, I mean, I don't like, I guess I know more about the movie universes in both of these topics, but like if you look at like 50s Batman, that is so much
And ask
different
questions.
and less
Also,
dark,
ask
for sure.
questions.
Oh yeah, so like I don't know, maybe like is it anything like that where like the movies are like totally like
I will
kids
say-
like where it's like not dark, it's like
I will say with
gosh,
Spider-Man.
Batman,
Oh well,
holy moly, Batman.
with Batman, the big revival, but I will also say with Spider-Man,
Yeah.
the biggest one that I would consider not very Spider-Man-like, and honestly, That's what a lot of people said is Spider-Man Homecoming and Far From Home.
Yeah.
Tom Holland Spider-Man, which Tom Holland
Right,
Spider-Man
right.
on his own, really interesting Peter Parker.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is, again, Spider-Man is always down on his luck,
Yeah.
has to pay rent, saves the day, but that causes him where he can't pay rent then. And he's always guilt-driven.
I
He
love
needs to
that.
do better. He messes up and he needs to do better in some way because of that guilt. He
Yeah.
needs to find a way to really go
Right.
through. With Batman, I would say the biggest thing with him was it was actually the Adam West Batman really deteriorated the Batman moniker.
Yeah.
And that's a funny, interesting thing. Everybody today is kind of like very, very Bat God symbology. It's like
Right.
the real serious
Yeah,
comic book
yeah.
nerds. They watch Batman, but they don't watch Superman because that's for kids. In the 70s, when the Christopher Reeves films came out, it was the opposite. Superman is the classic hero.
Yeah, it
but
was
the
the
reason
man's
why
man.
is because The Dark Knight Returns by I always forget his name. Dark Knight
The
Returns.
book?
Yeah, the book, the comic book, Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller.
Oh, yeah, Frank Miller's.
Before
I was gonna
that,
say Alan Moore did too.
yeah, and Alan Moore, and like that was a perfect comic because what happened was before that, Batman was the hokiest. Just like it was basically kids like Adam West TV
He was
show.
the
It's
gray
like,
and blue. Yeah, exactly.
he's a silly guy dancing. It's like, well, he has he has
Yeah.
shark repellent.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's for children.
ridiculous, Yeah.
But then what really revolutionized him and pushed comics in a very like more serious, cynical tone was The Dark Knight Returns, which it honestly really needed, especially for Batman because he was going out of like continuity. He was just becoming irrelevant because it's
Right.
like, oh, he's a kid's character. He's a goofy bat jumping around the cities. But it got it back to the roots. And like that's where it really built up. But that's generally with Batman where it evolved was Frank Miller absolutely like paramount to how Batman changed.
This is the way I like to think about it. This really resonates with me, and it has pretty much my whole life ever since I was a young adult. Is I have a very good friend who shall remain nameless. He is my only ginger friend. You know who you are.
He is the
And
ginger man.
He is. There's a reason I'm not gonna give his name.
He can wolf his body with gingerbread.
Exactly. He's a very, very good friend of mine. He's an avid comic book fan, like myself. And the point of mentioning him is because we being him and I, are pretty much perfect representations of the comic books that we read. It sounds really hokey, but if you ask him what his favorite comic books are, he's a white, skinny ginger who's a manager at a Disney store. And he has been the manager of the Disney store for years and years. Well, not the manager, but he's been working at the Disney store. It's been his only job, pretty much.
So he's
since
a
he
fan
got
of
out high
Marvel,
school. Oh yeah,
basically.
exactly. He's a Marvel guy. And not only does he say he's a Marvel guy, but even before like the movies were a huge thing, he was a Spider-Man guy. And talking to him when we were younger, and if you really talk to him and ask him, you know, it was because Spider-Man was the nerd's hero. But to kind of bring full circle exactly what you were saying, it wasn't because, oh, he was being made fun of for being a nerd.
Right.
It was much more so the fact that it was this nerdy persona that, not because he was being made fun of, but he was the perfect representation of my friend at the time. He's a representation of a huge underrepresented pocket of people, of even male and female fandom that are overlooked. Exactly, the pizza delivery guys,
that they put
the
on the
quiet
Spider-Man
guys.
mask, and
Exactly.
They save it, and then
Exactly.
the city responds, "I don't trust that Spider-Man. Who's the
Exactly.
Spider-Man?"
And
I
they
don't
just sit in the
trust him."
background and
But
laugh because they
he
know
needs to
exactly.
he needs to
That's
save the
it's
city
a
every
direct
time.
reflection upon my friend as to what he read his whole life, and his favorite comic book arc is when Spider-Man finds out that his parents were working for Oscorp and they were killed because they were working for Oscorp and they were running secret missions in Russia for SHIELD and things like that. That's his favorite. He has like just short of, you know, framed in his room. So that's that. Then you've got me Z, who has always loved more so. I love Marvel, but I don't love DC more, but what I love more than any Marvel story I've read is the Superman and the Batman arcs from DC that I've read as a child, because you've got these realistic character. We have realistic, not so much Superman, but you've got
Comic
these
book realism.
exactly comic book realism. You've got these connectable characters, and for me, I went okay. I didn't feel very close to a lot of people when I was a kid. I didn't know how to connect very well when I was a kid. So I empathize really well with this alien from another planet.
I would also
And
say
they're
like
all like outcasts. in a way.
Exactly, that's what I was gonna say. Is it boils down to one just
well,
before
they
you
have to
say
be superheroes.
just
Right,
one
and
very
that's, like,
simple
the
fact.
Main, like,
Yeah.
kind of growth.
It's
That's
one
all
very
it is.
simple fact is every character archetype that is a main superhero in the league of,
Yeah.
in the Justice League, or you can even take it Marvel and say the Avengers. If you really break it down, this is why I connected with comic books as a child. This is me personally. I connected with comic books because you can look at a comic book archetype and you can find someone to connect with, whether you're a
Yeah.
philanthropist white boy suburban kid or you're a butch lesbian
Wonder
from
Bread
South
White.
Florida.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or you're some gangster from South LA.
Yeah.
Anyone can find someone to connect with. Yeah, now you've got Black Lightning, you've got Superman, you've got Spider-Man, you've got, Bunker now.
Yeah.
You've got Terra, all these different characters that out of the box kids that would not have been able to come into 20 years ago
Yeah.
I'll say on a
that
side,
can now come into and relate
do
to.
not relate with Darkseid. That's a very bad idea.
Yeah, I agree. If you relate with Darkseid, you've got some. You shouldn't be listening to this podcast. You
something's
should be
going
listening to
on.
something else. You should be listening to a therapist. It's brought to you by friendly neighborhood Zander. But no, just to kind of get back on track, to kind of bring it back to what we were talking about, is that's what you've got the comics reflecting the times. I think is what makes them most successful.
Yeah.
And when you look at
Yeah.
comic
That's-
history, stagnation happened during 9/11. Stagnation happened a lot, like during the past 4 or 5 years after 9/11. It's because we didn't know what to create. We didn't have a lot to write about. We didn't
It's
know how to
also-
empathize.
it's
And
also
how,
like,
how do you connect the comic book world? with
how
that?
stuff started to happen where it was basically like the Iron Man double in a bottle. Where it was
Yes.
like his alcoholism.
Yes, that's a perfect
Speedy.
example.
Speedy
And his heroin addiction.
The heroin addiction
Exactly.
and everything like that. That's started to kind of
Exactly.
evolve like characters through. And I would say
Yeah.
as well, like the base root, where do you guys think the main distinction between DC and Marvel is? Where I would kind of put it on that factor and like seeing how they evolved. The main kind of focal point that was always between the two was Marvel was always very grounded, very relatable, down to earth, incredibly human characters, where they really try to build up through there. While with DC, it was more in terms of heavily symbolic,
Yeah.
almost god characters, but more deity characters where their symbology really focuses through. Batman is always a dark knight, but then when you see, for example, like I don't know which character would be good, but like someone from like the X-Men, like
Wolverine.
Wolverine, or
Wolverine
like
was
who's the
cut
guy
and
with
dry.
Cyclops.
See,
You
Cyclops
don't really know
also.
a lot about Cyclops, except he's a mutant just trying to grow up, live in life, and that's where, to me, Marvel does it the best, and that's where when it's focusing on just relativeness, and like basically the relativeness of the character and being so grounded
Relatability.
human, yeah, complete grays is always with like X-Men. Spider-Man is the poster child of that because he is gray, just completely everyman hero. He's just a fucking guy
Yeah.
from New York. He's a pizza guy, or he's
Right.
just a simple like kind of tech guy helping out
Exactly.
like a
I
scientist.
think
It's like,
what
Exactly.
you told me without telling me is that like Spider-Man's origin and his story is like timeless. So
Yeah.
It doesn't need. Yeah, like it
he's
just.
everyman.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
And
that's
that's why that's the
timelessness.
staple. Yeah.
That's the issue with Marvel
Yeah,
that I see.
that's
like,
the word of the day.
timelessness
Ah!
doesn't, because like you see with Spider-Man, timelessness is like very in-depth character, everything about that. But
Yep.
like let's just say like timelessness with like say Black Widow or Arrow or what was it the Arrow?
Speedy?
Green Arrow?
No, not Green Arrow in DC, but I can't even think of his name. The Archer guy in Marvel. I don't even know his name.
A Hawkeye.
Hawkeye, yeah. It's like where do
Funny.
we really see from that like the main vision and like everything from that, the timelessness from
Right.
Hawkeye
Mhm.
is, well, he's the guy that uses the bow and arrow.
Right.
And
The only timelessness from him is he wears a purple suit. Oh, he's always wearing a goddamn purple suit.
Yeah, and it's like that's the main part where I could see a little bit where I didn't really get into Marvel a lot, because you kind of have like that's where I kind of put it towards. Is like if you see the main teams for each side,
Yeah.
you got Avengers, which is basically a super soldier. They got super serum, and he's a tactician that uses a shield. Then you got like a billionaire that decided to create a mech suit to kind of go and fight. Then you also have basically a scientist that got into like an accident that put him through the gamma radiations, and basically whenever he gets angry, he gets stronger and turns into a different creature.
Right.
Then you also have a Russian spy,
Right.
and you have a guy that uses a bow and arrow.
And you get a god.
Yeah. And then like on the other end, when you look at like the Justice League, what you have is a last son from a dying planet, born as like a human being on Earth. You have the last person of a genocide coming to a new planet from Mars, wanting to shape in. You have a billionaire who lost his parents and was almost psychotically driven towards the single goal of removing crime. You have a guy that got into an accident that let him go into a strange extra-dimensional speed force that he can warp time and everything. You have a guy that was an Air Force pilot that got a cosmic ring that lets him create anything from his fingertips and stuff like that. And then you got as well an Amazonian from Themyscira that was sent out to the world to understand the people of the mankind.
World of man.
Exactly. And then like you got even Green Arrow. You have a Robin Hood-esque person that is going through the drudges, the thuggery of crime, like even deeper than Batman he goes through.
Right.
And like to me it's like which one sounds more in-depth and interesting to really like dig into?
Well,
like,
definitely
see,
DC,
That's
Whereas
I
like
don't
you're
know if it's,
explaining
like,
that to
general
me, and I'm
bias,
like, what
but
do you
it's, like-
mean? The Marvel movies are like way better because like the sounds way more interesting. You can do
Yeah,
so
like-
much
that's the
more.
thing is that's
And
what I was talking about
I will
earlier.
just say as well, I don't know a lot about Marvel at all, so that is where I'm definitely biased on. Never really went into, but the first like contact I saw DC and Marvel. Marvel, I was like, oh, Spider-Man looks really cool.
Right.
Who's everybody else? Oh yeah, another one, Thor.
Right.
Not- It's like creativity.
Well-
He's literally god of thunder.
Let me help you
where,
out.
Thor.
right. Where that
He-
exists. Whereas like
He can't be described outside. He's just mythological Thor,
Right.
god of thunder. It's like, oh, he got empowered by the gods to become like a savior for Thor
Right,
and
where
like an
that's, like,
ideal.
something
it's
we
like
know.
no. It's
Right.
like no, he's actually literally Thor. It's like, well, no, you mean he's like something else? It's like no, he's literally
right. I remember
like,
learning that and being like,
Yeah,
so
like-
he's literally Thor.
The
yeah, like,
Thor,
yeah.
right.
Beta Ray Bill sounds like a way cooler fucking
Well,
character. That would
Ares
be
though,
awesome.
Ares is in action. Ares is Ares in DC. Ares
Oh,
is
that's
the god
true.
of war, and he's the god of war.
But
you
the
know
main,
what I mean?
Yeah, the main thing with that though is Ares is like a general like I am the villain man, and it's like it's Greek mythology. But
Right.
at least with like with Wonder Woman, she's at least like an Amazonian from Themyscira, and then a pilot comes in.
Right.
during
Okay,
World
let me-
War
let
I,
me-
and he
let me
needs to
pose a
explore,
question.
rather than being like Hippolytia
Let me
or Hippolytia, and that's it. She's
Let me-
just from that.
let me pose a question. So we were talking about the relatability between Marvel and DC. We were talking about
Yeah, the best cookie cutter. I like that term because a lot of the Marvel like Thor.
what about
and
ridiculousness? Because if we're talking
Thor
about silliness,
can go really
really
nuts
unpack
and cool.
that, and we're talking about like you're talking about. So
Like base roots.
you wanted
base
me on this
origin.
because I know Marvel. So let's
Yeah.
unpack that a little bit, okay? So in Marvel, you've got a guy named Claw. In the cinematic universe, Claw's the main bad guy in Black Panther. He's the British guy that steals from
Yeah.
Wakanda.
He's Smeagol.
Exactly. In Andy Serkis, who plays him amazingly. If you look at Claw in the cinematic universe, he's a badass, crazy person with a really awesome fake hand. In the comic books, Claw is a ridiculous being of sound who has, I use the term being loosely because he's been addicted to cybernetic enhancements his whole life to kill superheroes. By the time he gets done, you've got a man, I'm not kidding, you've got a man with a harmonica for a mouth, a harmonica synthesizer for a mouth.
Yeah.
He's got a sound antenna for a hand. That's his claw. A fluorescent purple suit with a red helmet, and he runs around shooting sound waves out of an antenna.
That's the thing as well, is like the relatability again. He's a gray character. He's not just I'm full villain. It's
Exactly.
like more I wanna just like as you said was like I'm obsessed
Let's
with this
get
thing.
yeah
So I'm
exactly.
so obsessed with
Let's
it.
take
It's like,
let's take an idea and take it to the max.
Yeah,
Like
and like-
Man-Ape, who is also in Black Panther. Man-Ape in the comic books is actually a guy who becomes so obsessed with the idea of beating T'Challa, King T'Challa, that he injects gorilla DNA into his blood and ends up becoming a man-ape, which
Nice.
in the 60s, 70s you could have imagined was a little bit questionable as to that. But
especially Black Panther.
exactly.
comic book, it's
But
like,
Man-Ape
oh,
actually ended up
okay.
becoming one of
Yikes.
Black Panther's most powerful character arcs in all of Black Panther's history. He ends up
Yeah.
becoming one of the most
Wow.
significant characters in all of
You
that.
see, and that's the thing where like that's the distinction where that's the part where I totally see where everybody loves Marvel is like, especially the comic book, people really obsessed with the comic books is like, I can totally see that in terms of relatability and
Right.
the gray zone. Because when you go to DC, it's like Joker, he is insane. He is chaos, living chaos. He's not a gray zone though.
Yeah.
He is
Right.
strictly in the category of that.
Yeah.
He's symbolically.
He's
that.
chaotic evil,
Yeah,
you
his-
know that.
Own symbolism of his insanity becomes even more of his character.
Yeah.
But when you see it, it's typecast 100%. And like that's the part where I kind of like where it's like you really need to build grounded characters to really start going with that.
Right.
Or with Marvel, you can let it naturally grow and stuff.
See,
but at the
Yeah.
start, because like Thor is a big one. Because
Well,
Thor going through the universe, I forget what arc it was during the 70s, but that's where Thor Ragnarok was influenced. Was Thor was basically doing cybernetic, crazy ass fantasy adventures in the universe.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Holy shit! That I want to read that. But base Thor is cookie cutter. It's
Well, what about,
we need the God of Thunder in here. Let's just make
Right.
Thor. It's
Right.
Thor.
He's gonna talk
It's like-
weird. Right.
He's
No,
literally
exactly.
Thor from Asgard.
what about like Harley Quinn's origin and then like where she is now? Because she was just a
She's
side
interesting.
character.
That's a
It's
really
supposed
interesting
to
character
be-
to unpack. Cause you
think
know,
I might
do you
know
know
why.
her thing?
I'm pretty sure like she was just
Animated
supposed to be
series.
like one episode
Yeah.
Yeah.
and was really liked, so
And
they
you
were
see-
like, let's roll with that.
That's
Right.
where I think it started out because she was almost essentially kind of we need a goon for Joker.
Yeah,
to
like
kind of,
kind of like
but
a
it
parallel
evolved.
for him.
Joker needed
Yeah.
a foil.
Yeah.
Joker had no foil to that extremism.
just like how Batman needed his Robin. Joker
Exactly.
needed.
Yeah, and
It's the reverse detective.
Yeah.
like, and she has her own whole like she has like she starts to become good, right?
Right.
Like, she,
Yeah. She's become
Yeah.
good. She's become
She-
bad.
Yeah.
She's been an
She joined up
anti-hero.
with the.
Bi.
Yeah. Right.
She
Her
joined
and
up with
Poison Ivy.
Yeah.
Yep.
She also joined up with Power Girl, and I want to read those.
And isn't
Yeah. Me too.
That was
Crazy.
fucking cool.
That she just started off to be like that little thing in an animated
That's the same-
series.
Yeah, that's why people compare Harley Quinn and Mr. Freeze a lot
Yes, I
because
was about to
Mr.
say that.
Freeze was also a one-off, not a character, not supposed to be a one-off
I'm
character in the animated
Freeze
series,
Man.
but he was supposed to be a one-off comic book character.
Yeah.
But people loved him so much that he actually ended up becoming a staple in Batman canon.
And
He
it
was,
was
literally
actually-
supposed to be a one-off
It's
villain
because
for
of
one issue.
animated series. The animated
Oh,
series,
yeah.
they put the whole Mr. Freeze backstory of his wife. Before that, that was never.
Yeah, right.
And that's
Exactly.
fucking cool
He was
part.
supposed to be a one-off guy, no backstory, no canon to his name, no nothing.
I have a question. Did Poison Ivy come before Harley Quinn?
Yes.
So dang.
Yeah, Poison Ivy was a canon comic book
That's
character.
pretty
She was
crazy
a
that she
rogue.
ended up ending up with her.
Yeah.
Wow. I like
Catwoman
that.
and Poison Ivy were the only two main. And Nisa Al Ghul in the 70s. Nisa Al Ghul was a thing in the 70s, but she had like a 13-issue run, I believe, and that was pretty short-lived because people weren't ready for that at the time. They weren't ready for a female, really powerful female feminist icon because that was real feminism.
Right,
70s.
right.
So. Yes.
Don't mind me.
Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. Hashtag dead air. No, but so to kind
Hashtag
of keep the
Deadpool.
train, right?
Yeah.
Hey, that's so to bring it full circle. I'm glad you said that. That I was going to say
What
that
is it?
earlier. So
Deadpool.
two words, one hero, Deadpool. Basically, what Marvel did was they said, we're slow. folks.
That was a
we're
cookie
slow,
cutter
we're
turned into
stagnant.
something magnificent.
We need to gamble, is
Deathstroke.
what they said. We need to gamble.
Wow.
So they turned to a character that they didn't completely know what was going to happen.
It's Slade Wilson, Wade Wilson. That's
Exactly.
a classic. Because Teen Titans was doing so well, it's like, well, shit, we gotta get a Slade Wilson. We gotta get a Deathstroke as well. Let's just call him Deadpool. He's gonna be the same thing. Sucked ass at the start, but then finally people stopped caring in Marvel, and finally what happened was like, well, fuck it, let's just make him break the fourth wall.
Right, well,
let's
see,
just make him go
that's
insane.
the thing, is
That's
as a Marvel
insane.
reader, that's what I was saying earlier, is you walk into a comic shop back in the 80s or 90s, and you as a 20-something-year-old, you'd go, I'm probably going to go read something DC. As a kid, you go, I'm going to read Marvel. Deadpool brought Marvel to the adults. Deadpool
Yeah.
said, no, kids, I'm not for you. These red boxes of dialogue are for your dads. They're not for you. They're for the 20-year-olds that are going to be coming into the shop looking to read
Right.
something adult
Right.
and more relevant to their lives, which is why Deadpool killed, and there was real blood for the first time.
Right.
And there was cussing, and there was nudity, and not nudity, but nipple protrusions,
Right,
things
right.
like that, and there were
Yeah.
nipple jokes.
It
and
wasn't for
things.
kids.
Exactly,
Yeah.
it was not for kids at all, and it not only went over, it sold like fucking hotcakes. But the reason it sold, here's the key to this, it sold because it was different. People didn't understand what they were reading. They didn't know Deadpool had multiple personalities. They didn't know Redbox was going to end up becoming a fucking character in the Marvel canon. Redbox is his other personality. It is known as Redbox. It is his other voice. That was not any intention of the writers to begin with. When Rob Liefeld originally created it, he was not planning on this red box of dialogue being another voice. It was just his inner monologues. He let the people create this character for him, which is the key to most big time characters today. Is the writers take their creative freedoms, they put them out, and then they watch.
Right.
And they let the audiences read, which is why a big thing that they don't do today in comic books, especially in like you can see in this doesn't have any, they had reader questions at the end of every issue. You could write in at the end of the week, and then that next Wednesday, comic book release day, you could go back. Well, comic book release day is Wednesday now. I think it was Sunday back then. You could go back and read your comic books, and they would answer your questions,
you
and they would
literally
read those
mail
questions, and then they
to
would dictate what those arcs, or
Right.
might help dictate what those arcs were written
Right.
later on.
That was the classic Robin that turned into Red Hood, where it was choosing what you
Exactly.
wanted to do. And you could directly mail to the direct author.
Yep,
He
you could
would
mail to
respond
vote
you
what
in
happened.
What a
writing.
time.
Incredible. And that's a perfect example, because Red Hood ended up becoming canonically one of the best characters DC has ever put out. Back after this.
Alright, welcome back from the brief interruption here. We actually do have another guest as well. If you would like to introduce yourself, if you would like to use a moniker, or just your first name, or even both.
My name's Chris.
Awesome, and so I believe we were covering over in terms of Mr. Freeze, and then also about Harley Quinn, and like also how that was kind of a natural growth from like the TV show, where it kind of went against the DC general kind of like making them into very typecast symbolic characters.
Yeah.
That was more kind of like a reaction from the TV show, and it got very popular, and that's where in some way it kind of had like kind of new ground to really evolve the character, kind of in a like a Marvel way, but like more just kind of like actually in its own new unique way, where it could kind of have enough breadth to kind of realize the characters and everything there. That's where I really like with the Mr. Freeze storyline, where he was basically recreated as a character just from the Batman TV series, and that was a crazy shit.
Is that like in the comic books?
No,
Or
it was 100%
He got
from
his
the
own
Batman.
show?
Oh yeah. So
Yep.
what we're talking about right now is how Harley Quinn and Mr. Freeze is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
'Cause-
I brought up Harley Quinn because
Harley Quinn became very popular.
right, and you know how? Do you know
To
her
the point
origin?
to where she's getting her own cartoon show.
Yeah, right. And her origin was just to be a one-off character in
Right.
a TV special.
Right.
Like
But then it was
She-
majorly popular, so
right,
they kind of
right.
tacked her in
Which
alongside the Joker. Yeah.
insane. She, not just as far as like a comic book character, like just characters in general. Like I personally believe she's like one of the greats. She has so much depth,
Yeah,
so
I
much
really like
character,
her.
so much character growth. Like,
And she's
I
not
agree.
typecast, or
Right.
she eventually
From
became
something that-
typecast.
From something that was expected to
Right.
just be a one-off type
Right.
thing, like, oh hey, there's a clown girl.
Yeah,
okay,
and
she's
she
gone now.
eventually
right?
got
But-
where she
typecast
was supposed to be
into-
like girl Joker, like
Yeah.
sidekick Joker.
But then, so what about Freeze though? Like,
Yeah, that's
what
my question.
Mr. Freeze, it was the whole storyline. He was before a basic Batman villain of, hey, let's just get a guy with like freeze gun and he just
so
oh,
he
freeze
too was
shit.
supposed to be like a one-off.
Yeah, very
villain,
simplistic in the
okay.
comic books, but then what happened was the Batman animated series, which
Bruce
groundbreaking.
Timm. Bruce Timm. Sorry, I just
That was
it's
the
just,
guy's
it's,
name.
Bruce Timm is the main animator for the Rogues Gallery on the DC Batman animated 90s series. Bruce Timm created all of the canon
classic
models that we know
characterizations.
today. Bane, Ivy. He helped with Harley Quinn's physical design. Freeze. He was main on Freeze. Bruce Timm is the guy that we know for the Rogues today that we visually see
Okay.
today.
That's kind of like Teen Titans Cyborg from the TV show, and then
Yeah.
they got influenced to make it in the comics. Rather
Exactly.
than the old 80s Mark Wolfman.
The white,
sometimes,
exactly,
Right.
the white
sometimes they
suit.
did the cyborg kind of blue coloring and stuff,
Which
and I was like,
Yep.
that's
I-
fucking awesome.
That's true.
I wish I had more information on this, but there's like this little YouTube series that I watch that talks about like costumes of characters and like their
Yeah.
influence on like the comics and like how like sometimes the TV interpretation of the costume was so good that it made it into the comics.
That happens more times than not. You
Amazing.
see a comic book, because that's another thing.
Here's classic one, Christopher Reeve.
Perfect example.
Shaina.
That's a prime example, because before Christopher Reeves, all you had before that was, ironically enough, George Reeves, which was
1950s
exactly
father figure.
exactly.
Well, you see,
You've got
Jimmy
this
Olsen.
6-foot tall man who was in. George Reeves was
Always-
I believe it was like 2 to 4 minute shorts back in the 50s and 60s. He would portray Superman as he would come in almost like a live action newspaper comic.
Yeah.
He would come in and in 2 frames he would solve the problem and then he would leave. And it was just wholesome tights,
Yeah.
cape draping off, and that
Basic-
was it.
all
Curl.
that's missing from
and that
him
was all.
was basically a pipe and like a
Uh-huh.
bathrobe
Exactly.
and like a leather chair and be like, "Hello, son."
Exactly.
How's
there was
everything
nothing
going?"
Just
defined
50s
about
dad.
it.
Yeah.
Right. There was
Even
they
deeper.
directly took what was on the page and translated it almost wholeheartedly onto the screen.
Yeah.
Which is what you don't see. You don't see that today.
There was something I read on Tumblr once, so if you know this is true, let me know. But like, I think it was like the first televised like cartoon of Spider-Man. Do you know when that was?
Yeah, the 60s.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think it was the 60s.
Yeah.
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 That's where all
They
the
Amazing
didn't
Spider-Man
know.
was the
Yeah, that's
60s,
where all
yeah.
the memes come from. They didn't know, but it was like the first time they were like doing something like this, and the only time they ever did voices for superheroes was like Superman and like
Yeah.
Yeah,
hey. And so that's how like Spider-Man was like at first. Was
Did
like,
it mention that Spider-Man had the same voice actor for over 70% of the characters?
Oh, really?
That's
I didn't
how
know that.
untraditional that style
That's
was
how
the guy
low
who played
budget was
Spider-Man
successful.
was Green Goblin
Spider-Man.
and Doc Ock and J. Jonah Jameson. He was almost all
That's
the male
hilarious.
characters.
That
It's
breeds-
incredible.
So kind of like Djibouti dubs, how when they dub over it,
Exactly.
it's
It's
all
just
the
the
same,
same
like,
guy
the
doing
same
different
two
types of the
guys,
voice. Yeah, exactly.
also about to
Exactly.
say, I
Well,
love
what
the
we
fucking
know
Djibouti
today is for
dubs.
voice acting, whereas like that's hilarious. Like most voice acting is like when you look it up on IMDb, like the same actors are playing all the characters.
Exactly.
No idea.
And it goes all the way back to, you're talking the 40s and 50s. You're talking Mel Blanc, who created most of the characters from
Yeah.
Warner Brothers, Bugs Bunny, Foghorn Leghorn, Marvin E. Martian.
Yeah.
He was those characters. The woman who did Granny from Warner Brothers, she was Tweety Bird and Granny
Yeah.
and all those characters. And these aren't just characters. It's the same thing with comic book voices. Also, in comic book
Yeah.
actors, is they become those characters.
Yeah.
Like Robert Downey Jr., perfect example to transition kind of into the Marvel
Yeah.
Cinematic Universe a little bit. Robert Downey Jr. is no longer, for the past over a decade, Robert Downey Jr. has not been Robert Downey Jr. He has been Tony Stark.
Yeah.
Right.
Hugh
filled the
Jackman,
work.
even
So-
though Hugh
Right.
Jackman has done tons of other things on
Right.
stage and off since he's become Wolverine, he has only been Wolverine to a very significant group of people.
I want to know from
Daniel
you
Radcliffe.
because
Exactly.
I want to know from you because like from the comic books, was it common for Wolverine to have like the fucking giant mutton chops, or was that specifically from Hugh Jackman?
No,
That starts to
the
influence
mutton
that.
chops and the
Yeah.
wing hair, that is all classic Weapon X. That is all
okay.
Weapon X stuff. It is
That's a good
supposed to
one.
be a
I like
play
that one.
on. That's why Sabretooth also has mutton chops, because they were both developed in a Weapon X program, which if you technically Sabretooth is Weapon 9, which is why Weapon X is not it's not the letter, it's the Roman numeral for 10, because Logan was the 10th experiment
Yeah.
to be through the Weapon X program.
That's what I remember. Sabretooth has bones, while basically Wolverine has
Bones at the
adamantium.
beginning, and then exactly after he goes through the full program, he gets the adamantium exoskeleton. Sabretooth has the reason that Wolverine has the chops is because they want to give you as the viewer a visual link between Wolverine and Sabretooth. Sabretooth has chops that if you look at his actual character model, his mutton chops translate all the way down his body. It becomes full body hair.
Yeah.
It's his body hair just goes up and it stops at his face.
It's like a Sabretooth.
Exactly.
Wow.
And the reason they do that is because they want you to see he's just short of man and beast,
Yeah.
and Logan Wolverine is the apex of that. He's just a little bit tiny. That's
Is
the tiny
the
little link.
hero
Exactly.
of
It's a
the-
tiny little subtle link to that part. To
Wait, so
go back
better-
even
he's
further.
a more refined,
Exactly
version.
version of Sabretooth.
Wow.
Exactly.
Hero.
and that's why he got the adamantium.
Exactly,
Like,
and even to even take it back further, to go back to kind of bring it full circle, what we were talking about before on our break, we were talking about kind of different races being represented
Yeah.
in superhero fandom. Something that people don't realize that is looked over a lot is, did you know there was a black Captain America before Captain America? The Weapon X
Oh.
program actually
that.
led to Patriot. Patriot is an African American black Captain America. He went through the super soldier serum before Captain America did. And just so that we know we're in the 50s America, the reason it was a black guy who went through before the white guys because it was a black guy. That's just
Yeah.
how the canon is.
Yeah.
And
You
they
didn't
wanted
know
to
if it
test
would
it on
kill
him
him?
before, exactly. And it did
Oh.
kill 9 out of the 10 test subjects, and he was the only one that survived. And to bring it full circle, his grandson is going to be a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe
so
coming
glad.
into the
Okay,
new
that's
generation.
good.
And that's bringing in from the comic book stories and everything there,
That's
where it's like.
important.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Because
And-
the last thing I wanted to see was a token just. Okay, we gotta make him a different color. It's
Let's
like,
throw
Right.
Falcon in.
Right,
Exactly.
right. And I
Exactly.
think like for companies that just started back then, like Disney, I think it's really important. Like Disney's made a pretty big effort in like flipping the script of like the racism and like hatred
Yeah.
that was what Disney it was. There was blackface and stuff.
Yeah.
But like
They paid
it's
with their soul.
really important, like, and that's an amazing way to flip it, to like take something that had kind of racist, like problematic origins, because that's kind of problematic.
Right.
Like that's the
And be like,
belief.
oh wait, let's just make it nice now.
Yeah, like,
Like,
let's fucking take this character and make him
unappropriate this
Yeah,
culture. like, you know.
well unappropriate. I like
At least that's what they're trying.
Right,
You know,
right.
because
We're
there's
just
no way in hell
supposed-
they'd be able to
'cause
continue
you're not-
any of that these
right.
days.
You can't defend it.
Yeah.
Like just
And it's like,
fucking
geez,
fix
sorry,
it.
the
You
past
see,
is the
and that's-
past. They
Yeah.
were racist back
Yeah,
then.
it's not like you're not gonna shut down Disneyland.
Yeah.
And you see, and that's the thing where it's like with going back to either like the Marvel or the DC, the ones that I love the best is where they really actually make the character from the soul and really try to like kind of make a new character rather than just kind of copy pasting. How I call it is always
Yeah.
token, because I always just don't like the token part because it's like immediately when you put that front, it's immediately political message first,
Right.
character second, rather than character
Pandering,
first.
yeah.
And really developing
Yeah,
them, making them
dude,
awesome.
that's genius.
That's,
a good way to put
I
it.
agree.
Going
That's
to
an
that is,
amazing.
more of a
that's
cop
an
out
amazing
the other
Multiverse.
way.
It's pandering the
Yeah.
other
It's-
way.
It's terrible.
With
Yeah.
multiversity,
It's not
where I
good.
like is Grant Morrison. He made what was it? Dax Novu, or somebody like that with like the Multiversity comics,
Yeah.
where he basically involved him as a monitor, as the main character, and that's why the CW universe, it was the main monitor. I don't know if there's probably some like kind of outrage from it that he's black or something, but it's like it actually does relate in terms of the Multiversity comics where Dax Nova was one of the monitors.
Yeah.
I would say technically in terms of, because they're monitors, so they're beyond time, space, race,
Right. They're basically
whatever.
celestial beings.
Yeah, but with this, it's like it's okay because it comes back from the comic books where Grant Morrison was making this Dax Nova character, which
Yeah.
was a monitor. He was an African American, or technically he was basically just a black skin kind of being.
Yeah, there was
That
no
kinda went
there
through.
there was
Right,
no
right.
race, exactly. That's how
It
far
was-
beyond Grant Morrison was thinking.
And that was the part where he wanted to involve, or I think I'm gonna assume, so that makes me an ass out of me, because I'm assuming, but I'm just thinking Grant Morrison just not so much didn't give a shit about color, he gave a lot of shits about color, or more. He gave a lot of interest in terms of color, and that's why he created in terms of this universe where
He wanted all
didn't
color
matter.
to be equal.
Yeah,
Exactly,
it
I
did-
understand.
It was always the content that he was the main monitor left afterwards, after all the crazy shit happening in the DC universe.
Right.
And so he's the main monitor that makes sure that everything is all running well and stuff. And it's like that. It naturally flows into it. It naturally flows into in terms of a character.
You
that's
don't
growing
find
on its
yourself
own.
questioning
It's
it
on
as
its
a
own.
reader.
Yeah, it's not like what was it? Iron Man for some reason got stuck into like the netverse of his assistant robot
Oh,
thing.
right,
And then
right.
all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, we got a black Iron Man. It's like, but why?
That sounds
Right.
like a reach. Yeah, like.
But
we're
why?
trying
Why?
hard.
Superman did the same thing. Do you remember? You probably might not know this. So there's an issue of
Wait,
Superman.
Are you talking about
Yeah,
Henry
yeah.
Irons?
No,
Henry
no,
Irons.
no,
Okay,
no,
yeah,
not
he's
Steel.
A traditional
No, no,
character.
no, not
Steel
Steel.
is awesome.
Steel
Oh,
is one of my favorite Supermen. There's a black Superman. His name is Steel, Henry Irons. Shaquille
Irons.
O'Neal was actually in a movie
Yes,
about him.
yes.
It was the first real Marvel
He
movie.
was the first
Oh.
I
Iron
have that
Man.
on VHS. Yeah,
He was
dude.
the first Iron
Hell
Man.
yeah.
Oh, shit.
So this is how DC first handled racial inception into the DC universe. Was Lois Lane being the hard-hitting feminist reporter that she is. She wanted to know, this was the 70s, I believe this is 1974, don't quote me on that, I think 74, 75, we'll say
Was it
mid-70s,
Death of
to be
Superman?
safe. No,
Oh,
this
okay, is that-
is a in-between issue. This is just before the death of Superman. This is an
okay.
in-between issue where Lois Lane wants to find out what it's like to be a black woman in Metropolis for a day. And she goes to the Fortress of Solitude, to which Superman says, "Oh, in my infinite Kryptonian technology, I just happen to have a machine that will change the pigment of your skin from white to black." And so she goes into this
Kryptonian
machine.
'Cause
technology.
that's the actual terminology.
Right, yeah, that's how it happens.
You have white skin and you have black
You
skin.
just get black now. So she goes in
That is-
and actually comes out as a black female and lives as it's a very
Can I ask-
hard hitting
Can
issue.
I ask, do they just like make her skin darker?
No, they
literally
changed her
changed-
design.
Okay,
They
I just
complete.
needed to know.
I was
If it was
gonna
like
say-
some like black Barbie where they just like made her skin darker, but she still has like blue eyes and like,
It's what
No,
the fuck
she
is that?
actually
Blue
they
eyes.
full on changed
and her hair is like
everything.
still the same. They just made her skin. You know what I'm talking about?
It's
The
I had a black
pigmentation.
one. It was basically Barbie with darker skin.
Yeah, no, that's the main part of that show. Where it's
You guys
like,
remember
wait,
that?
What the fuck's
You
going
guys remember
on?
that? You didn't have one? Just me?
It's still the straight hair, not curly or
Yeah,
anything
straight hair.
that.
Like it was just like literally they just. Okay.
So it
That's
actually
not-
like they
that's
it,
pretty-
it wasn't like they treated it insensitively by any means.
Right.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
I'm
seven-
showing them the actual cell, which is
She looks like-
it's
like-
a 1,
like
2, 3,
honestly,
4,
like-
5 cell illustration.
She looks like Beyonce.
70s style. Like yeah, like
What was it in
Fashion.
the 70s? Yeah.
natural
and,
hair.
the
I like it.
the caption is locked inside the transforming mold. Lois undergoes a startling change.
I'm startled.
That sounds perfect, like classical comic book introduction. That's also as well though. DC always, I don't know with Marvel though, but like DC always still does like the very
That's still I would say pretty
grandiose,
questionable.
like,
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But
Today, 100%. Back
they
then,
surprised me a little bit with like the way she looked.
with
Like,
the
it
way
was
that
very,
they did
like,
it,
natural
yeah,
hair,
exactly.
like,
Especially
very
because it was still done by a white bread illustrator and writer.
interesting.
Yeah, Yeah, there was no special writer that came in for that issue. That was the same writer that had been penning it for the past 4 years. So the only change was the narrative and the mindset, which is society, again, bringing it full circle, society dictating what comics put out. And to kind of go back to what I began my kind of thing with earlier, was the inception of Fantastic Four was for one thing and one thing only. They went to this guy Stan Lee and they said, we don't know what to do. We need you to make something entertaining. And he said, okay, but you need to let me do something original. And they said, I don't know. He did it anyways, made the Fantastic Four.
I like the Fantastic Four.
It was the...
I would say, though, as well, Jack Kirby did involve a lot as well. Like, that's where he made Galactus 100%.
Oh, yo, no.
That was
100% for Marvel, but to create Marvel...
Oh, yeah.
Fantastic Four is the flagship.
Stanley...
Fantastic Four was the flagship franchise that birthed Marvel Comics.
And then
it
it was
just
Spider-Man
literally on the tail was Galactus.
Yeah, and then
with Jack Kirby being the head on that.
And then I know, like, Spider-Man was Stan Lee's 100% creation. Like, that
was
like his main...
That was his secondary. They said, we can now give you the money.
Yeah.
What can you do? And he said, I'll give you some stuff. And then he created Spider-Man. And right after Spider-Man came Gwen Stacy and Mary Jane and the Green Goblin. And I believe the only rogues and main characters that Stan Lee did not help create were Hydro Man, one of my personal favorites, Hydro Man, and...
It doesn't go too well with Sandman.
Hydro Man and Mysterio. Hydro Man and Mysterio were not created by Stan Lee. Hydro Man and Mysterio were created by outside artists and creators that came in and collaborated. But everyone else, Stan Lee and Ditko. That was Stan Lee and Steve Ditko.
Okay, and I know, like,
together.
Ditko is, like, a major comic writer on
They worked together a lot on the original Spider-Man books. A lot on the original Spider-Man books. Yeah, it was a big deal. It was a big deal to have such that's okay. So to kind of bring the comparison back, because this is a talk about DC versus Marvel and the assets in between, right, and character developments between them. You've got, so look at the palettes. Palettes being colors. Think about the colors of DC versus Marvel. Marvel has been canonically vibrant, very lucid, very bright. And DC has had its brighter issues and characters, but for the main part, not even talking Batman, it's darker, it's grittier, it's realer. Talking Swamp Thing, Constantine.
I would say they always kept up with the traditional outfit. The traditional muscle man, Batman, Superman style, and they came...
I agree with that.
They still came with, like, those ideas and still kept with... Like, there still is, like, the original, like, Green Lantern where he found, like, a genie lamp and that created the powers for him, where he was basically wearing, like a Doctor Strange kind of outfit or something like that.
But see, even then, that's what I mean, is you've got these amazing designs that are just greens, blacks, blues, and whites. You know what I mean? Marvel gave you these grandiose color patterns and palettes that you didn't even know could exist.
Also, was that a lot with, like, X-Men as well? Because, like, I imagine, like, X-Men, the coloring scheme kind of worked a lot, like...
X-Men's a perfect example. Exactly. That's why X-Men went over as big and as quickly as they did, because you had yellow, blue, pink, red, green.
They're all hyper-related.
Exactly. You had guys that had space on their costumes for some weird reason.
I think I just realized is, like, the villains in DC are much more colorful.
Wow.
Like,
I never thought about
flamboyant.
that. I'm right. Double entendre.
It's the character foils between, because there's such symbolic characters. The symbology kind of goes with, like, of course, classics being, like, Joker.
I never thought about
Batman,
that. What a great way to foil your villains. You give these gritty heroes, which is why... Wow, what an amazing way to make the Flash the standout, witty character that he is. That just hit me.
Wow.
He's yellow and red.
Yeah.
When he's not in his Flash suit, he's still wearing some semblance of red. He's the brightest palette character. So of course he's going to be the easiest one to stand out,
Yeah.
aside from everything else, dialogue aside, you know what I mean? Even Green Arrow. Green Arrow's green and yellow, but he doesn't pop the way that the Flash
right,
does.
it's dark green, like
Yeah.
it blends in, like almost camouflage.
Exactly. Wow.
I feel like this is what I learned from you guys tonight, is that Marvel has their stories that are like so timeless that you don't really need to tweak them throughout time,
Yeah.
like over time, like
Blackface stories.
I'll say
so.
that was a ghost introduction from
Who said that?
the void. From the nether.
Do you guys hear that wind?
and and DC kind of gives you these, I don't think vague is the right word, but like these characters that give you enough freedom to change, like Harley Quinn, for example, or like
Take risks.
yeah, and to just adapt and change
Totally.
over time, and that's what
I think that's a great assumption to come to. I love that. I love ending it on the note that character development can change, but as much as it can change for DC, Marvel has showed us that it can remain the same
Yeah.
while keeping the while you're
It's
keeping the
relatability.
characters exactly. You're
That's
keeping the
the main
characters
focal point.
relatable, but you're adding new ones to
Right.
change with the times, as
Right.
opposed to DC, which takes risks with the characters they've already had.
Yeah.
And they're always, they take the chances and everything, but they are always timeless in the main characterization. They are pure. No matter what. Marvel, the exact opposite. They're constantly like ingrained in terms of changing who they are in terms of their main focal stance. Like Spider-Man, he's always guilt-driven, everything in terms of that.
Right.
But his moral stance always changes. Soon enough, he becomes, like, in one part, he can't pay rent or anything like that. He becomes not enraged, but he becomes pissed off at the world. And what the fuck? What's going on? And then another part, he's going like that. But he always has that guilt-driven part, but he's always still constantly changing. And then you look in terms of, like, a Batman, Green Lantern, Flash. Pure, constant, always the same, but the plot drives it around.
The
and
plot
symbology.
around them. Wow,
And
yeah,
that's
totally.
the main focal point where it always relates between the two. And that's why I personally always like DC, because I love that classical,
I agree.
deific, like, symbology of it. But, like, in terms of down to earth, I definitely want to, I've always wanted to read heavily into, like, Spider-Man, and then also, like, Fantastic Four, like, X-Men as well.
Right.
Because it's so relatable, and people are so gray, constantly changing stances, and they still have their backstory in terms of, like, that's where the relatability in the backstory makes it everything. Because, like, to go back, it's like Iron Man. Besides the Robert Downey Jr. part, because Robert Downey Jr. basically revived the character from obscurity of, here's a man in an iron suit.
Right, nobody cared about Iron Man
Yeah.
before Robert
I,
Downey.
I
got brought in.
personally remember watching him in a TV show, and I was like, that's cool, an iron suit. I like Iron Man.
Right.
And then I remember the Iron Man movies come out, and I was like, oh, that's that one guy in
That's
the
that
iron
dorky
suit.
orange and red guy.
Yeah.
I loved that guy. I remember in the old TV show, he's like, I'm in this desert planet. Don't worry about me. I have my heart stone thing
Right.
that will help me through this. And he's almost talking like a robot
Right.
before Robert Downey Jr. But now he has character. But before that, with that character, I would say it's kind of like a... I would say it's almost like kind of a blank slate. A kind of meh. He never really has a lot going for him because they try to go very symbolic with him, but they never really built up a shit ton of story, like background and everything. He's just a billionaire. He's a mix between Batman and Lex Luthor. He made a super suit because he's a billionaire because I'm gonna make the suit.
Right,
I just
because he
wanna do
could.
good.
Yeah, he was the
Yeah, it was
child.
like-
Yeah, he was the child prodigy of a trillionaire CEO. You know, it
Yeah,
was
and
like if
There was never a Batman origin for. He just
Right.
decided, and that's where like that's the part is the relatability when it was like Demon in a Bottle or what was it, Iron Man.
Devil in a
or
Bottle.
Devil in a Bottle.
Yeah.
That started to grow character with him in a perfect Marvel way because it makes it very
empathy.
human,
Exactly.
relatable.
See, that's exactly what I was
It's-
talking about.
Marvel
Is you give
heroes
him a
are
human
corruptible.
trait.
Marvel
Exactly.
heroes are corruptible. They
Exactly.
can go through bad stages. DC
Oh,
heroes
billionaire
never.
philanthropist Tony Stark, Iron Man, who is literally so ballsy he'll tell the whole world that he's Iron Man
Oh,
if
yeah,
he has
that's a-
alcoholism.
That is
It's
one
killing
part.
him. That was a huge.
That's
that
one
was
part I
such
like
a
about
huge
Iron Man.
blow to the comic boy industry, when you found out that Tony Stark not only was an alcoholic, but that it had been killing him for the past God knows how many issues you had been reading. This was like, that's a big thing that I can't really express enough. Before the Marvel Universe, these were times when you couldn't just go on the internet. And, like, the internet was there. It's not like, oh, I go on the internet. Right. It's not like that. It was these times before the internet knew. Right. Because it wasn't written about yet. You didn't know as a comic reader that Tony Stark had alcohol poisoning and it was killing him, and that the arc reactor was one of the only things keeping him alive. And then that became this 17-issue arc that ended up developing his character and changing him as a person, turning him from this playboy by day to Iron Man by night to just Iron Man. He needed this plot device to turn him into the superhero that we know today, that was able to then turn Dr. Doom into Iron Man. Did you know that? That's the plot device that ended up leading to, is Dr. Doom saw Tony Stark's sacrifice that he had put up with for the past 20 years, plus years, as an alcoholic, ex-alcoholic, and he said, if Tony Stark can put away his toys and survive, I can be more than just some sociopath who wants to take over the world. And he ends up building an Iron Man suit and becoming, I believe he becomes, his run is the Unstoppable Iron Man. So he ends up becoming Iron Man. So Dr. Doom.
Was his intelligence akin to Tony Stark's?
100%. Yeah. Absolutely. Oh. Yeah, and his willpower
even
more
his
so.
plans or anything. He just figured it out and made his own.
Right. He just built his own that was better and powered by Dr. Doom's own electricity. Yeah, his own self-generated electricity.
So he didn't have an arc reactor because he didn't need it because he had his own power source coming out.
He powered it through the things around him.
I would also say that that's also a perfect way to wrap up in terms of the ideas that we kind of gathered, and so would you say just a general consensus is the kind of developments with the comic books and how they kind of inspired through, it kind of developed into their own kind of archetypes of not as simple as Avengers, Justice League, but in general the Marvel, DC kind of ethos and how they went through. It's what do you guys kind of think on the idea kind of
Well, for me, I think this is the best way I could put it, is as a child, I found myself reading Marvel books, and as I grew into an adult, I still, because of how many Marvel books I read as a kid, I know more about Marvel, but I connect and can empathize deeper with DC as an adult. That's what I got from all of this that we talked about, the self-realization that I came to, is
the symbol or the symbologies overtaking the character, which in some way is bad storytelling, but for comic books it works out very well.
It works out really well. It wouldn't work in most mediums, but in comic books it does. It's a very rare medium. It's not like film where you can't count on films to grow with you, but comic books is something that you could actually count on growing with you and growing with the society that you're living in and reflecting the society you're in.
That's where Grant Morrison said he's going to create comic books. He creates comic books, and he's going to be creating DC, and then long after he's dead, DC's still going to be creating comic book stories about different characters.
Yep, they're going to grow and evolve.
It's an mythology kind of.
I learned a lot tonight about comic book universes, and I think like I said earlier, I'm really taking away that Marvel is able to write things that are relatably timelessly relatable, and you don't need to tweak it or really do too much to change that story. You could add new characters.
Exactly.
But the origins are what they are. I know Spider-Man's story, and I've heard it a million times.
Right. It's always going to be the same thing. Right.
Whereas,
and that's okay.
Where I feel and that's good. Whereas I think DC just is able to create a world where it's always changing. There's always different universes. You can always write something, and you have that freedom. And I think that's also equally good in a different way.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love that.
I would say then from there, this seems like a perfect point to kind of end off the Morbidly Elenctic podcast episode. I would say though, do any of you guys have any last parting words?
I just wanted to end it on two things. One, this has shown me I think we should start a separate just comic podcast. And two, I think we should end it on something every time you do an interview. I think you should end it on something unique to the people you're interviewing. Mine is going to be, my name is Zander, and I could always tell you the difference between Doctor Strange and Dr. Mario.
Fair enough.
I lost what I was gonna say. I really feel like I would love talking about this more again, and I don't know. I don't have a sign off.
Definitely
Yeah.
more into DC Universe, because I definitely know for sure we can do a
Yeah,
lot of
dude.
things unpacking DC, and like potential with Titans universe, and as well, Chris.
My
if you'd
name's
like,
Chris. I was barely here for this, and I'm gonna leave you with a question: who would win, Elastic Man or Plastic Man? Or I don't know, one from each.
Elongated man.
Elongated.
Plastic man or elongated man? Answer in the comments down below.
And finally, from the void of the nether materializes. If you'd like to introduce yourself and a final word.
I'm a ghost. Ooh.
God damn it, Tim.
And that was, and as well, this is Tim. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Hope you guys have a good day.